What's up everyone, Pierre here from Into Fly Fishing, and welcome to another one of our fly fishing tips videos. The purpose of our channel is to share our experiences to ultimately make you a better fly angler. If you find this video helpful and interesting, please consider subscribing to our channel and turning on those notifications, then we can let you know as soon as we release any future videos like these. Now in today's video we'll be taking a closer look at what bass eat. Now, bass are one of the most successful freshwater predatory species. It is certainly, if not the one of the most important and popular game fish species, freshwater game fish species in the world, and for good reason. They are so much fun to catch. They occur in so many different places, so from rivers to sort of brackish, warm, shallow lakes. They just occur everywhere and they take flies very readily. They're so much fun to catch. Because bass are so opportunistic, they will feed on anything that swims or floats past them on the top water or even subsurface. So depending on your specific location, the bass might have a slightly different feeding habit. The purpose of this video, however, is to cover the most important food sources for bass so that you can target them more successfully. So first off, one of the most important food sources for bass are baitfish. Now, I'm not talking about small crazy Charlie sort of sized flies, using them, although they will work. Now, I'm talking about really proper big baitfish imitations, and you'll be really surprised the size of fly or fish that a decent bass can fit inside its mouth. Bass don't only attack other fish species because they see them as a food source. Females, big females that are in their spawning season, congregate around their nests, and this is where they hold. They really become very territorial. So anything that swims past or comes closer to the nest gets hammered. As far as flies go, you'll need a good selection of subsurface and topwater flies. Now, subsurface flies will win hands down when it comes to the number of strikes or the number of fish you catch. But if it's fireworks that you're after, there's nothing that beats a good topwater fly, something like a small double-barrel popper or even a crease fly. If the river or dam that you are fishing in has a good population of crustaceans, especially larger sort of crawdaddies or crayfish, the bass are definitely feeding on them. So I'm not talking about small scuds or tiny shrimps. Here I'm talking about throwing really big sort of lifelike crayfish patterns. If I'm looking for a good bass crayfish pattern, I'm looking for something that has a good big profile and it has a ton of movement. So something that is tied with a lot of natural materials, especially around the claws, because you're not always fishing this fly very quick. You might fish it slow, but then with this natural material, the crawdaddy or the crayfish actually still has a lot of movement. So this is what you want in a good crayfish pattern. If you're fishing along weed beds or lily pads, good amphibians to imitate with your fly is salamanders and frogs. Bass go mad for these. As in the case when you're fishing a baitfish imitation, you can choose whether the fly that is imitating the amphibian swims below the surface or on the top of the water. One of the things that I like most about fishing a frog pattern is that you can fish it relatively slow. You cast the frog up against the bank or the lily pad and you give it a couple of pops, pop here and a pop there, and then you just let it sit there, just let it simmer. And then one of the coolest things is if you pop it again and suddenly there's a bass that appears very slowly from below the lily pads, and he swims up and he just sits behind this fly, and as that frog just lies there as a normal frog would do, he just comes up and he just opens that bucket mouth of his, and he just inhales that fly. This is what's great about fishing frog patterns. If you're fishing for bass in rivers and the fish are stacked up against the bank or holed up against the bank or under some overgrown sort of side stream vegetation, there's a good chance that the fish have adapted to look upwards and feed on terrestrials. So they would respond to a terrestrial insect falling onto the water's surface. So good flies or insects to imitate you are grasshoppers and beetles. When you're fishing a hopper pattern to the bank, or a beetle pattern for that matter, and you expect there are some bass, make sure to overpower the front cast slightly just to get a good thump on the water or a good plop on the water. And as the fly lands, make sure that you are in contact with your fly. So if you deliver the fly, don't let the fly line shoot out of your hand. Make sure that the fly line runs in your line controlling hand, and as the fly lands on the water, give it a little strip just to take up any slack that was generated or fed into the system as you made your cast. Then be very, very aware of what's happening around the fly so that you are on it as soon as the bass takes the fly. Another very important food source for bass are worms, and you see a lot of conventional and spinning anglers that use either live worms or they use rubber sort of lures that are imitative of worms. But the very interesting thing is that you don't see a lot of fly anglers target bass with worm-like patterns. I think perhaps the main reason for this is that you think when you fly fish for bass, you have to use a baitfish or some sort of very fast moving fly pattern, so that when you cast out you retrieve, and that's what gets the fly, the bass to eat the fly. But in so many other different forms of fly fishing, we do natural drifts and very slow sort of styles of fishing, and this is what I urge you to do, is try and attempt this when you're next on a dam and you're trying to bass fish. Get a pattern that imitates a worm fly and cast up against a bank and structure and deeper drop-offs, and fish it relatively slow as you would when you're euro nymphing or fishing buzzers or anything like that. Just make sure that you are in contact with a fly constantly, maybe a small figure of 8, and then now and then just give it a big sort of jerk just to get that worm-like fly to move about. Talking about that, a very good worm-like fly is called a snake fly. So it's a fly that is predominantly used for stillwater trout. It's a long sort of eel, small eel or a big leech type fly, and it imitates a worm to a very good extent. I hope that you found this video helpful and that it will really help you to understand bass a lot better, so that you have a good selection of flies and you know how to fish those flies. They are such an incredible fish species and they're so much fun to catch. Please subscribe to our channel and turn on those notifications, then we can let you know as soon as we release any future videos like these. Until next time, cheers.